survivor. I grew up in rural Texas. My dad had traded a boatload of rifles and crossbows for a small parcel of land in Maypearl, Texas, named after the original mayor's two daughters, May and Pearl. So I grew up super lonely. It was really isolated. There wasn't a lot to do other than play with the animals. I really didn't see people other than my family for maybe 1 week, 2 weeks at a stretch, except for church. So a typical day in my family, and what I would do is I'd wake up and I'd go out and throw some hay to the animals, throw them some feed. I'd give them a bucket of hot water if the trough had frozen over, and then I'd head inside to start my schoolwork. Sorry, what are you doing, Sarah? So, a typical day, I would start with math, and I'd take about 4 or 5 tries to get my problems right, head on to social studies, then I'd head on to science, where I learned that the Earth was 6,000 years old and that evolution was problematic. Then I would start with my current events, and that meant that I watched Rush Limbaugh for an hour during lunch, and that was followed by Jack Van Impe at night. And if you're not familiar with him, he was a televangelist that would take current events and frame them in the context of the rapture and the tribulation and the apocalypse. So I started having panic attacks about the age of 8 to 10. And they were really intense. I would be having a hard time breathing. I would be shivering in bed. I would be unable to move. And while I would go hang out with the animals, a lot of times it was just really overwhelming and I couldn't get out of it. I started getting preoccupied with the idea of running away, and then I became really preoccupied with the idea of killing myself. My first attempt was at age 12, and I found my dad's .45 in his dresser drawer, but I couldn't find the bullets. And when I pulled the trigger, there was nothing in the chamber. I was really relieved because I had been scared to death, and I walked away from it, but the feeling persisted that I still just wanted to die. I did not want to be here. I did not want to face what was coming. And then when we were 13, my cousin Adam died. He was in Hawaii and he killed himself with a crossbow. And there was a lot of talk about the means and everything. Everyone was very confused, and most of all because he had insisted on getting his jacket the night before from the school. Nobody could figure out why, and the family was just completely devastated. I had a little bit of a different thought. I was relieved for Adam, and my first thought was Adam got out. My suicidal intensity continued into adulthood. I had things that exacerbated it, like, just rampant poverty my whole life, homelessness, the death of my father, the death of my best friend. I always felt this feeling of burdensomeness, like I had taken something from somebody, and this feeling of cringe over everything that I've said and that I did. I just pull into myself. But then things started looking up, and things started stabilizing a little bit. I became a mom, and I had a small house in Texas. I ran for public office and got run out of town because of it. And then we took a flying leap to Los Angeles in 2019. I was doing my master's degree at USC in environmental planning and urban planning, environmental planning and sustainability. When we went through a 5-month bout of homelessness, living out in the car with the kids. But then I met a wonderful man who was brilliant and fun, and he gave me a job, and we had a beautiful life together. We were raising kids together, we were doing theater together because he was an artist too, and just generally everything was great until we did a play together that was incredibly traumatic. And I started drinking very, very heavily. I drank so much. And so the relationship turned toxic, and there were a lot of fights. Everything devolved, and then after a heavy betrayal, I was pushed to my limits. And I busted through the glass door with a hammer, and he left. I was bowled over, I was broken, I didn't know what to do. But my first thought was, hey, let's get this alcohol under control. So I decided to check into a facility for detox, and found a place. I arrived late at night, I pulled up, and took one last shot of bourbon in the parking lot, and grabbed my purse and went into the facility. There I went through my intake, and I was assured that I could go get my things in the back seat of my car where I had left them to go check to make sure that I had the right building. I was taken to my room, I was searched, and then I was told that I wouldn't be able to get my things. I sat up all night, staring at the wall. The 15-minute checks kept me up all night. Apparently no one has ever learned how to close a door. By morning I was absolutely exhausted, and I was condescended to by an aide. I was told I couldn't go get my cigarettes out of my purse to go smoke with everybody else, and so I said, I'm done, and I've had it. And I booked it towards the door. There was a point in the hallway in which a cop stopped me. I was turned around, and I was told that I was being put on a 5150 hold. It's not going. So the hold was for 3 days. It was brutal as an artist because I was only given crayons and markers during groups. But the only time I got to go outside was for smoke breaks. The yard was covered in vomit and surrounded in razor wire. People were threatened with extra days for asking to go home. The 15-minute checks continued. I did not sleep the entire time I was there. And so eventually, realizing that the patient advocate was not going to be on site during the entire duration of my stay, I decided I was going to have to advocate for myself. The psychiatrist came into my room to discuss whether or not I was going to be held for extra days. And I said, well, that's not going to happen. And I want to know why I'm being held. And he said it was because I had disclosed suicidal intensity and attempts in my past, and I had stared at the wrong white wall, apparently, for too long on my intake. So I said, well, tell you what, your reaction to the word suicide is a you problem, not a me problem, and I want out. And he had had food poisoning the night before, which I like to think I sent the juju to give that to him. And he didn't have it in him to battle me, and so I got to go. On the drive back, I received 2 calls from my ex/employer and his colleague asking for work product. And I said, I'm sorry, I cannot give that to you today. You know I've just come off this hold and I need a break. So I got back to an empty house, and I felt a lot of shame because I couldn't work. I felt like I couldn't support my kids in some way, even if it was just a day. And I felt this really intense sense of dread. I should have felt relieved that I was out. I should have felt relief that, you know, I had gotten off my hold, I had done the thing, and now I was home. But instead I felt this sense that I could be captured, that I could be held, and that anybody could do anything that they wanted to me. And the apocalypse came up. And I started to drink. And that night, I had the most lethal attempt of my life. I tried to kill myself, and when the first attempt didn't work, I moved on to the second. My friend called me after seeing my post saying goodbye to my kids on social media, and I don't really remember talking to her, but I know I must have said something, because 20 minutes later, LA SWAT showed up because there were explosives involved, and they scooped me up, and I have the distinction of being 5150 twice in 1 week. got to the hospital, and I kept trying to escape, so they put me in one of the bays. I will be forever grateful to two people that I met on that hold. One of them was the doctor that stitched me up. She was really, really focused on salvaging my tattoo, and like spent a lot of time really, really trying to get in there and making sure it was preserved. And the second was the nurse that let me have my phone for 20 seconds so that I could say, that I could take that post down saying goodbye to my kids on Facebook. Because they did that for me, I was able to really focus on getting through the hold, getting through that time where I needed to start to heal. And they were just absolutely wonderful. So again, what then? I figured the alcohol was still a problem. My therapist insisted it was. So they were really, really such a help finding a place that was compassionate. I went into inpatient treatment, and y'all, it was like a vacation. It was awesome. I didn't have to cook. I had to do minimal amounts of cleaning. It was really a brilliant place over there in Santa Monica. It was really nice. And got through that, and got my kids back from Texas. I had sent them to stay with my sister for a long time. And it was really brilliant to have them back. But during my time in the facility, I didn't really jive with DBT that much. Some of the exercises kind of irritated me, but I got a whole lot of value out of this one exercise called the 5 years worth living thing. And in that, I identified in the next 5 years, I wanted to have certain things, one of which was I wanted my kids to be healthy and happy. I really wanted to advance my chess skills. I wanted to renew my skills in painting because I had been totally zapped and essentially forgot how to paint. And then I wanted to be a support to my community. And I wanted a job of peer support in suicide prevention. And so that's where I found a lot of care, compassion, and meaning in Living Beyond Suicide. This is an initiative that works and elevates the voices of the missing experts in suicide prevention, that is, the people that have been there. We especially work to elevate those voices that have been marginalized and historically excluded in the suicide prevention conversation. It's a really beautiful community full of the pirates of suicide prevention, and I have a bunch of fun with them. But they really wanted to do something tangible as a resource, helping guide family and friends and providers and practitioners and policymakers how to actionably support someone with suicide experiences. So we came up with the Blueprint for Change. The Blueprint Blueprint for Change is a zine that highlights survivors' stories, and we're pairing it with artists and poets to show the vibrancy of what it looks like to live beyond suicide. And we're looking to redefine kind of how suicide is addressed, discussed, and approached. We're also looking to get some information out of survivors of suicide experience, asking such things as, what mattered most to you during your experience with suicide? What would you have wanted to be asked during your experience? What was missing? And what do you want someone to understand about your experience with suicide? And I'll tell you what, we have gained some beautiful, beautiful, and very brutally honest information so far out of the folks that have started to contribute. I found a lot of meaning in my work, but also reasons to go on. I don't know what's going to happen in the future, and I still think about the apocalypse a lot. I live with this every single day. But I do know that I'm bettering my chances every day. I'm getting to do art and be around my kids and I'm really starting to focus on what the future brings, and I believe I have the best chance of survival yet. Thank you all so much.